It's churning through the Caribbean, and next, the United States. Hurricane Helene gaining strength, and it looks like over the next 24 hours, it's got the potential to become even more destructive, with Florida's Gulf Coast right in the bullseye. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. And Hurricane Helene's outer bands are already hitting parts of South Florida. It is a Category 1 right now, but by this time tomorrow, we could be looking at least a Category 3 storm, maybe even a Category 4. And Helene has already brought heavy rain, strong winds, and flooding across the Caribbean. Here's a bit of what people have been dealing with earlier today.
Esperemos que por la noche no empeore la situación. Y según, está lloviendo desde tempranito, así que sí, posiblemente hay inundaciones.
Lluvias intensas, pero no pienso que nos dañe como otros huracanes que nos han dañado y hemos salido fortalecidos, más fortalecidos con las tormentas.
As Helene moves into the Gulf of Mexico, the National Hurricane Center is warning people across the southeast that this is a life-threatening situation. Tropical force winds could stretch nearly 300 miles wide from the storm's eye, and storm surge could reach as high as 18 feet in some parts of Florida. And that is why there are now emergency alerts and declarations stretching up to Virginia. Nearly every county in Florida is under a state of emergency, and evacuations are happening all along their west coast. Even NASA has scrubbed its planned SpaceX launch. We've got team coverage tonight. Kathy Park is in Tallahassee. Marissa Parra is in Tampa. But first, let's go to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, are we in the window right now of rapid intensification?
We're waiting for that, Gadi, and the longer it takes to happen, the better. So, we just got the new update in from the Hurricane Center. It hasn't increased in the last 3 hours. That's fantastic. We got 24 hours to go, though, over extremely warm water. So these are kind of the headlines that I'm watching. First is the impact of the most populated area is going to be Tallahassee. It's about 30 miles inland from where we expect the landfall to be. And if it does hit as a Category 3 or maybe a low-end Category 4, this would be the strongest hurricane ever to hit Tallahassee in their city's recorded history. Next, the storm surge, up to 20 feet. That's historic. But it's going to happen in a very unpopulated, remote area. So we may not see a lot of, historic damage from this, but there are some spots I am concerned with. And then the historic rainfall that has already started in areas of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, especially in the mountainous areas, maybe even Atlanta. That is going to be a problematic story that may cause landslides, life-threatening flash flooding, and even river flooding, too. So here's the update from the Hurricane Center. It's at 85 miles per hour, so a solid Category 1. It is heading due northwards, and it's over the warm water. It's pulling away from the Yucatan, which kind of weakened it a little bit. It didn't allow it to keep rapidly intensifying. But the Hurricane Center, they think in 6 hours it can go from 85 to 110. That may be a little generous, but you get the idea. They think it's going to continue to ramp up tomorrow afternoon up to a 130-mile-per-hour storm. That's increasing now by 45 miles per hour. That's significant. And then heading here tomorrow night at this time, making landfall somewhere between Apalachicola and just south there of Tallahassee. And then from there, tomorrow night during the overnight hours, it races through Georgia. A lot of wind damage problem, a lot of rainfall problems. In Atlanta, you're going to get this worse than you've probably experienced with any tropical system. Wind gusts 60 to 80 miles per hour, 10 inches of rain. That's no joke. Our computer models are all in excellent agreement. We're heading this up here near Tallahassee. We're hoping that they don't get the direct hit, but right now it looks like that's a most likely scenario. Tropical storm warnings go up to Charlotte, North Carolina, and all the way down to Key West. 36 million people included in this. And as far as the biggest impacts go with surge, it's going to be this area from Cedar Key northward. Somewhere in here could get that 15 to 20 feet. But even that 8 to 12 feet and 6 to 8 feet possibly in Tampa Bay, that could be historic. We've never seen a storm surge higher than 8 foot in Tampa Bay. So there'll be water in places that haven't seen it before. And as far as the rain goes, it's already pouring in these areas. It's drawing tropical moisture northwards well ahead of the storm. And that's why we have a rare high risk that goes just outside of Atlanta up to Asheville, North Carolina, and also by Tallahassee. When you have high risk, that means we expect significant life-threatening flash flooding in those areas. And someone's going to get up to 15 inches of rain, Gadi, in the mountainous areas of North Carolina. I mean, that's a lot of rain. We're going to be talking landslides, flash flooding, mudslides, everything that comes with it. There's so many elements to this storm over such a huge area, and I think that's going to be the legacy of this storm. You know, what happens in Tallahassee, obviously, but then just a huge footprint of how many people are impacted from South Florida all the way up into areas of Tennessee.
It looks terrifying. Bill Cairns, thank you. Let's turn now to NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra joining us now from Tampa. Marissa, there are mandatory evacuations in effect. I understand you got evacuated a little bit earlier. What are you seeing there on the ground?
Hey, Gadi, we sure did. And I can tell you right now that the city, the region, and especially the state is taking this very seriously. And you can see an example of exactly that, Gadi. This is normally a bustling river walk. And what you can't see because it's dark at night is not that far away from us. We're feet away from Tampa Bay. And this is the reason why this area has been evacuated. And so what you see instead here, I'm standing in front of very closed storefronts. And right here to my left is sort of a fortress, if you will, of these panels. These are flood protection panels, and we have seen a lot of these around the area, Gadi, and we have seen those evacuations happening, particularly in those low-lying areas and areas like this one that are very close to the bay. Of course, further out, maybe further west, it might be those areas that are closer to the Gulf of Mexico. But either way, mandatory evacuations have been happening. And then we were at a sandbagging distribution center earlier this morning. We were talking to a lot of people who were trying to prepare their home before they either evacuated or maybe preparing their home with those sandbags as they prepared to hunker down. And it was as we were doing our reporting there, Gadi, that we got the alert. We were an hour away from our hotel, had to race back and get our stuff out. But Gadi, I will just point out the privilege that we have to be able to go to a different hotel. We were just able to find a hotel that was further inland, that's far away from the evacuation zone. But I want to take you to someone who really illustrated for us how not everyone has that ability, Gadi, and that is something that is so important to not lose sight of. We traveled and visited some mobile home parks, RV parks, and we met a woman. We asked her if she was evacuating because she was in a mandatory evacuation zone, and she said she wasn't able to afford to do that. And I asked her, are you able to go to a shelter? And she had said it's difficult financially for people in her position to just pick up and move every time a storm hits or every time there's a threat of a storm. Here's what she told us.
So we can't afford to go to a hotel or somewhere. Most of these people don't have family members to go to. I mean, we're not lazy, you know. We're hunkering down here, and that's about all we can do. You know, we do a lot of work to stay where we're at.
And Gadi, as Bill illustrated, the massive scope of this storm, at last check, we know it was over 61, or at least 61 counties out of Florida's 67 under a state of emergency. We're seeing closures left and right around the state. We're talking about schools. We're talking about government buildings. We even know there are assisted living facilities, hospitals that have been evacuated in certain regions or parts of the state. And we know even places like Disney World are operating under limited operations. But of course, all of that could change. All of this could change in general over the next 24 hours as we await for Helene to make landfall, Gadi.
Marissa Parra, thank you. Thanks for the reminder that mandatory sometimes means different things to different people. Thanks again for your reporting. And NBC News correspondent Kathy Park joins us now from Tallahassee, Florida. Kathy, what are officials saying today there with the storm already moving in?
Yeah, so Gadi, officials are saying really time is running out to prepare. You have a small window tomorrow morning, but after that, really, the time is to hunker down, find a secure shelter, and ride out the storm until it passes. But here in Tallahassee, especially, this storm could be unprecedented. We heard from the mayor not too long ago. He said if this comes and makes a direct hit into this area as a Cat 3, this would be the most powerful, most catastrophic storm to hit the region ever. Take a listen.
Need everybody to take this storm extremely seriously. This is the biggest storm in the history of the city of Tallahassee to hit us head on. I'm very nervous. We're very prepared, but I'm very nervous, and I hope everyone is nervous. This is a big storm. It is going to cause a lot of damage.
And Gadi, here in Tallahassee, the concern isn't so much on storm surge like some of the coastal communities, but on the impacts from these extreme winds, hurricane force winds, which could last for several hours. So we could be looking at down power lines, down trees, and just prolonged power outages. But of course, ahead of this storm, officials here in Tallahassee, they say they have mobilized resources from pretty much all across the country. In fact, 9 different states. They have crews coming in tonight. They plan on tripling their workforce in the next coming day or so.
And one thing that's different these days is the amount of electric vehicles there are. I know that the governor was also talking about preparing electric cars. What are they saying there?
Yeah, so Gadi, a lot of people own EVs these days, and the governor said try to find higher ground for these vehicles, because if that battery mixes with the salt water, it could spark a flame and create a huge fire. In fact, it's happened in the past, and it could take thousands of gallons of water to put out these flames. So if you can take any sort of precaution today, tomorrow morning, get that to higher ground. Remember that EV, if it mixes with salt water, it could spell trouble.
And Tallahassee, obviously like a very big college town. Do you know what students are doing to hunker down?
Yeah, so a lot of universities have already closed for the day. They plan on staying closed throughout the weekend. FSU specifically, they say if you do plan on staying on campus, that is an option for you, but you do need to find space, interior space away from windows. Obviously, you want to be out of harm's way, so likely you'll be told to go into basements and bathrooms. FSU is also opening up a refuge center that students can turn to. That opens up tomorrow morning, but you do have to stay in this facility until the storm passes and you get the all clear. Gadi?
Kathy Park out there in Tallahassee, please stay safe for the next 24 to 48 hours. Meanwhile, new developments tonight about the ongoing assassination threats against former President Donald Trump. The Trump campaign says the presidential candidate was briefed by intelligence officials about potential threats from Iran to assassinate him, and that briefing happened yesterday. Secretary of State Blinken talked about it today.
Look, this is something we've been tracking very intensely for a long time, an ongoing threat by Iran against a number of senior officials, including former government officials like President Trump and some people who are currently serving the administration. So it's something we take very, very seriously. We're looking at it very carefully. I don't have any further information to share, but know that we're watching this very carefully.
The former president did address the reports during a campaign stop earlier today in North Carolina, adding that it's up to President Biden to stop Iran.
We've been threatened very directly by Iran, and I think you have to let them know, because the best way to do it is through the office of the president, that you do any attacks on former presidents or candidates for president, your country gets blown to smithereens.
NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has more.
Right, Gadi, there's a heightened concern about security here, especially as early ballots begin making their ways into the mailboxes of voters around the country, including right here in North Carolina. The Trump campaign acknowledging that the former president met yesterday with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence about Iranian threats and plans to attempt to assassinate him. Of course, there have already been 2 attempted assassinations on his life here this summer. And for Donald Trump, there is a reckoning here that he is being surrounded by a more intense and aware Secret Service force. We watched this here at the campaign rally here today, in which as he was shaking hands after his event, you saw those agents snuggled up right alongside of him as he shakes the hands of supporters. This, for Donald Trump, also is coming at a time in which he's openly announcing through his campaign that he's going to return, not this weekend, but next weekend, at the very site where he was shot back in July. He's going to be holding a campaign rally a week from now in Butler, Pennsylvania. Of course, this is going to be outdoors, literally at the same grounds of where the first event unfolded here. And there was a report released by members of Congress here today, which called out, after interviews with Secret Service agents and local law enforcement, what ultimately went wrong the day that he was shot, that there were not visual barriers up against him. And this is, for this campaign, a very a key moment here. When Donald Trump is trying to hit the campaign trail, he's going to be having additional rallies in the likes of Wisconsin ahead, And so for him, this is a moment here where this is going to amount to, like in the event of today, a smaller campaign event where he was focusing on the economy, where polling numbers suggest that he's in a very tight race with Kamala Harris in a head-to-head matchup. But when it comes to the economy, he has a sizable lead in terms of voters who believe that he's best equipped to handle economic policy in the country than Kamala Harris. And that's where you saw her today offer her own speech, trying to address and quell some of those concerns among American voters. Donald Trump, for his part, offering a proposal to implement aggressive tariffs on all U.S. imports coming into the country. This is going to be an intense few weeks ahead here as those mail ballots begin making their ways to the voters around the country, Gadi.
Sure is. Von Hilliard, thank you. And breaking news tonight, a Secret Service agent on Vice President Kamala Harris's security detail has been placed on administrative leave, and that decision coming after accusations of sexual misconduct for allegedly groping a Harris staffer. Officials telling NBC News that the agent was intoxicated at the time of the alleged incident. Harris's office was notified of the incident, saying that they take the safety of their staff seriously and have, quote, a zero-tolerance policy to sexual misconduct. The agent's gun and badge were confiscated, and they will remain on leave pending an inquiry. Meanwhile, Vice President Harris was in Pennsylvania today focusing on her economic agenda during a speech in Pittsburgh, calling herself a capitalist, comparing her vision to that of FDR's, and all while she attacked Trump.
For Donald Trump, our economy works best if it works for those who own the big skyscrapers, not those who actually build them, not those who wire them, not those who mop the floors. I believe we need to grow our middle class and make sure our economy works for everyone.
Harris also sitting down for a one-on-one with our colleague Stephanie Rule for a wide-ranging interview where she talked more about the economy, abortion, and Trump's popularity among women. Take a listen.
Depression, when you look at, for example, as a result of that perspective that he has about women, he also then chose 3 members of the United States Supreme Court who did as he intended, undid the protections of Roe v. Wade. I don't think the women of America need him to say he's going to protect them. The women of America need him to trust them.
Let's bring in NBC senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, our latest NBC poll shows that abortion is one issue that Harris has a lead over Trump, but Trump is leading when it comes to the economy. VP Harris calling herself a capitalist, comparing herself to FDR a little today at the event in Pittsburgh. Is this Harris trying to cut in on that lead on the economy?
Certainly, that is one of the top issues for a variety of voters across the battleground states, and she knows that she is polling behind that issue on as compared to Donald Trump. So clearly she wanted today to lay out what advisors called a major speech. It was giving an overview of a number of her policies on the economy. They've also posted to her campaign website an 80-page document that goes through a lot of the specifics for those who have said she had not provided many specifics. So answering some of those issues on investment in entrepreneurs, on dealing with things like manufacturing and how to bring it back or encourage more of it here in the United States. And of course, in a city like Pittsburgh, where we are, that is something that is relatable. Union labor, an industry dominant like steel has been for this community. So she definitely wants to try to chip away at the edge that Donald Trump has. And we hear the former president on the campaign trail talking all the time about the Harris economy and saying that she hasn't done enough while she's been in office. So he pounds that issue day to day as a part of his campaign, and she's trying to answer that with her own set of policies and to contrast her vision with what she says is Donald Trump's plan, which in Harris's view gives more favoritism to tax breaks for the wealthy and not the middle class. So that's a distinction she's trying to draw. Gadi?
And Kelly, immigration, that's also another issue where Trump has this pretty big lead over Harris. How's Harris trying to get ahead of that?
Well, if you ask a lot of voters who have not made up their mind or might be inclined to support Donald Trump, the economy and immigration are among the first things they'll talk about. And Vice President Harris is trying to use the fact that Donald Trump encouraged other Republicans to kill a border bill that was bipartisan to try to bring more resources to the border and to do so politically, that it was better to hold off on that, to run on it during the campaign. She will argue that. She's headed on Friday to Arizona, one of the key battleground states of this cycle, and we expect that she is going to go visit the southern border and to talk about issues like that, whether Donald Trump would actually make a difference on the border. She says she's making a pledge to sign that bill if she's elected president, to bring it back and to try to get it through Congress. Again, it was a bipartisan bill that ultimately failed, and she says that's part of the reason the border has been so difficult. And she says that immigration needs to be repaired. The system is broken, she says, and that, of course, is an area where Republicans say she is vulnerable because that's such a hot-button issue for so many voters across the country. Gadi?
It sure is. Kelly O'Donnell in Pittsburgh for us tonight. Kelly, thank you. Now, don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Still ahead, bus passengers taken hostage in downtown L.A., one of them killed. What we're learning about the armed hijacker and how police took him into custody. But first, an IED blast inside of a California courthouse. The rush to make sure the suspect didn't get away and where that device might have come from. And later this hour, a school seems kind of fit for the Jetsons. Books, sort of. Tests, yep, those happen. Teachers, nowhere in sight. We are taking you to the Texas school where artificial intelligence is more than just a substitute. It is part of the foundation for how kids learn. Stay tuned for tonight's Future of Everything.
No teachers and AI. Do you see that as the inevitable future?
This is the future of education.
Hey, welcome back. We've got new details on the courthouse explosion in California this afternoon. But first, here's some of the other stories we're watching out in the West. The family of Kaylee Gonzalez, one of the victims of the Idaho University murders, started a GoFundMe to raise money to attend Bryan Kohberger's trial next June. Now, this comes a couple weeks after the Idaho Supreme Court granted Kohberger a change of venue, moving his murder trial to Boise, roughly 300 miles away from the location of those killings. And earlier today, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed 3 bills into law on oil and gas operations in the state. The new legislation aims to reduce pollution from oil and gas wells near areas like daycares or schools. And a boy who was abducted from California in 1951 was found alive more than 70 years later on the East Coast. Luis Armando Albino was 6 years old when he was kidnapped from an Oakland party by a woman who promised him candy. Albino's niece found him by chance after taking an online ancestry test for fun, and she just kept searching until she found her uncle. And here in California, some sort of IED exploded in a courthouse, and tonight, police have a man in custody. Police are still examining exactly what kind of device was set off, but it happened in Santa Maria, about 150 miles north of Los Angeles. At least 6 people are now in the hospital from that blast. And NBC correspondent David Noriega joins us now from Santa Maria. David, what's the latest with this investigation?
Yeah, Gadi, so there was just a press conference held by authorities right here at this courthouse where they kind of laid out all of the details of the story that we've been waiting to hear all day. And here's what they told us. They said that the suspect who has been detained is identified as 20-year-old Nathaniel McGuire of here in Santa Maria. They told us that he was actually set to be arraigned in this courthouse behind me today on a gun charge from a gun arrest that happened back in July. He walked into the building carrying a bag, threw that bag at the security checkpoint at the front entrance to this courthouse, and that bag then exploded, injuring those 6 people that you mentioned. The Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office is describing this as, in their words, a local incident committed by a local individual with a local grievance. That said, though, Gadi, the FBI has been on scene all day, and an FBI special agent at this same press conference said that the FBI has opened a federal investigation into this incident, although they believe at this point that Mr. McGuire does not have any connections to any organized terrorist activity. Gadi?
Good to know there. David, how big of an explosion was this? And it was right there at the, I guess, at the security area?
Yeah, so he threw this improvised explosive device at the security checkpoint. We don't know exactly what was in that device, Gadi, and we've been hearing kind of conflicting information about it all day, which is why we've held off on reporting any of those details. But what we can gather about the size and nature of that explosive device, we can gather pretty much from the injuries that it caused, right? 5 or 6 people were injured with non-life-threatening injuries. They were transported to a nearby hospital from this courthouse and were treated and released in the course of the same day. Some witnesses who've spoken to us said that this was obviously shocking and scary, but that it could have been much worse. Gadi?
David Noriega out there in Santa Maria for us. David, thank you. Meanwhile, a dramatic scene playing out this morning here in Los Angeles. A gunman hijacked a bus, leading to the shooting death of a passenger on board and a massive police presence. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson has more.
Downtown Los Angeles, besieged by a storm of sirens. As a small army of squad cars tailed this hijacked LA Metro bus for an hour, the driver, police say, steering the bus at gunpoint.
This operator continued to operate the bus in as safe a manner as he could.
Police say the bus came under assault shortly before 1 a.m. The hijacker, identified by police as Lamont Campbell, shot one passenger, sending others running from the bus.
The operator initiated the emergency protocols on the bus.
Police say the driver remembered a piece of life-saving training, pressing a panic button to display a distress signal on the bus's message board. 911, call police, emergency, spurring the LAPD into action. Deploying spike strips, funneling the bus into a trap. The SWAT team surrounding the bus. Storming in, pulling the driver to safety, arresting the suspect, alive and unhurt.
He surrendered immediately, and there was no use of force at the end of the pursuit.
Police say one passenger was shot multiple times. The victim later died at the hospital. No one else was hurt. A small wonder, police say, thanks to the quick thinking of the man steering away from danger.
They are civil service heroes.
Courage under fire, calm behind the wheel.
Calm behind the wheel. Steve Patterson joins us live here in the studio. Steve, I mean, those shots of the bus driver there with the gunman behind him driving by, they're haunting. What do we know about the person that died and the 2 people that survived?
So no motive at this point. Obviously, this is still very much under investigation. What we are hearing is that there was some sort of altercation on the bus that led to the shooting. The shooting victim suffered multiple gunshots. We're hearing police on scene. We could see them trying to do CPR to save this person, taken to the hospital, and later died. Learning more, of course, about the suspect, the 51-year-old, on $2 million bond as we speak. And there was another person on the bus who apparently, according to our affiliate, hid in the back of the bus to wait until police arrived and then was safely got off the bus.
So the gunman may not have even known that they were on the bus.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Steve, we just saw an alert from the mayor's office saying that they had a press conference about this with some new details. What more are we learning?
Yeah, first of all, reinforcing the fact that they believe that this driver was a hero, essentially having the presence of mind to press that panic button, alerting police that this was happening, possibly saving more lives. Who knows what would have happened beyond this, but also that they want to do more to sort of reinforce the fact that they want to improve safety on public transportation. It's the one thing I think people sort of complain about or have a fear about in Los Angeles is taking the train, taking the bus. They're adding more panic buttons, maybe more methods of detection of weapons on buses and trains. There was a barrier that was between the passengers and the driver, which they say is sort of crediting with, being allowed to have that driver press that panic button in the first place, maybe adding more sort of instruments like that.
Wow, that's such a good reminder for all of us Angelinos that if you see a bus that says call 911, something very dangerous is happening inside. Steve Patterson, thank you.
Thanks.
And near Cincinnati, Ohio, officials have just lifted an evacuation order after a toxic chemical leak. That word coming down about an hour ago, and authorities say a pressure release valve on a train was leaking styrene. That's a toxic and flammable chemical used to make plastic and rubber. If exposed, it can cause a person headaches, nausea, and respiratory issues. Long-term exposure can lead to more serious health problems. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has been following this story. Maggie, what's the latest?
Hey there, this leak started yesterday afternoon, and the fear factor in this community has just been skyrocketing since. People in the small town of Cleves, Ohio, had to evacuate their homes within a half-mile radius of this leak site. Officials say that's about 220 homes. You can see yesterday the toxic and officials say cancer-causing chemical styrene was just spewing into the air from a train car. Officials have since stopped that leak, but immediately and throughout the day today, were dousing the car with water to try and basically keep it cool, saying if it got too hot, it could explode. They've been giving updates around the clock since, but at a press conference earlier today, especially, tensions really boiled over, with residents from the area showing up and challenging officials about the real-life impact of this spill.
What do you recommend to residents who had numb tongues and burning eyes, still dealing with headaches? Residents are feeling displaced, scared. They have nowhere to go. They left their everything. They stepped up and walked out of their house. My mom left without her wheelchair.
And we're ready to help you with that. So we'll talk with you guys inside in a more private manner.
And we saw on camera officials basically meeting with residents one-on-one, seemingly wanting to hear their stories, hear more about their concerns after that press conference. At the same time, local officials during that press conference named a global chemical producer called INEOS, as they said the owner, or at least the leaser, of that rail car and of that product, the styrene inside of it. NBC News reached out to that company and we got a statement in response. It reads, at least in part, INEOS Styro Solution confirms that the product is owned by its affiliate, INEOS ABS USA LLC, and that it was involved in this incident, adding, quote, "We deeply regret the disruption and stress this situation has caused to the local community, and that the venting of the tank followed the operation of a safety valve, which operated as designed to rapidly reduce pressure in the tank." They go on to say they're still working to figure out why all of this had to happen in the first place. Back to you.
Maggie Vespa, thank you. And coming up, tensions in the Middle East are nearing a boiling point. Hezbollah takes aim at Israel's second largest city, while the IDF appears to be getting ready to go inside Lebanon on the ground. Our Richard Engel has the very latest on people trying to get out of the line of fire. But first, you got to see this. This is a terrifying moment yesterday when a coyote snatched up Britley Furlan's dog. She's the wife of Motley Crue drummer Tommy Lee. Now, Furlan shared the surveillance footage on her Instagram and said she was able to climb a wall and then pull her dog out of the coyote's mouth. Talk about a close call. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Finland is returning 2 giant pandas to China in November. That is 8 years earlier than expected because those guys are expensive. Lumi and Pyrai arrived in 2018 under a 15-year agreement, but the zoo couldn't afford their 1.5 million euro upkeep a year, so both countries have agreed that the pandas are going back. And South Korea says it might take military action if North Korea's trash balloons cause any casualties. Over 120 balloons were launched this week alone, and more than 5,000 trash balloons took off this year. They have disrupted flights, sparked fires, sometimes carrying household waste, including poop. President Vladimir Putin warns that Russia could use nuclear weapons if attacked with Western missiles. And all this is in response to the talks between the U.S. and the U.K. about allowing Ukraine to fire Western weapons into Russia. Putin also says this nuclear protection extends to Belarus. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky criticized peace efforts from China and Brazil, calling their proposals half-hearted. Now, speaking at the UN General Assembly, Zelensky warned that these alternatives would only give Russia room to continue its war. Zelensky says he plans to discuss a victory plan with President Biden later this week. Meanwhile, full-fledged war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon seems closer than ever. Today, the IDF says they struck nearly 300 Hezbollah targets. Lebanon says at least 51 people were killed as of this morning, bringing the death toll from Monday to over 600. Meanwhile, Hezbollah continues to fire rockets south. Israel says they have intercepted a missile headed towards Tel Aviv. That happened earlier today, and an IDF military chief told Israeli soldiers those airstrikes are meant to, quote, prepare the terrain for a possible ground operation, warning the soldiers to prepare themselves for a very strong response. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has the latest.
Israel now says its strikes into Lebanon are preparatory to take out Hezbollah fighters and weapons before a possible ground invasion. The chief of staff of the Israeli military today told his troops a maneuver is being planned into Lebanon, where the death toll from air attacks has been rising for days. You will go in, destroy the enemy there, and decisively destroy their infrastructure, he said. Hezbollah leaders are promising to inflict heavy casualties in a ground war. And to prove they're undeterred, the Iranian-backed militia group, for the first time, launched a missile at Tel Aviv. The missile was shot down by Israeli defenses. The last time Israel invaded Lebanon was in 2006. That war crippled Lebanon and destroyed its infrastructure. After heavy losses, Israel ended the operation. President Biden today still hopeful.
An all-out war is possible, but I think there's also the opportunity, or still in play, to have a settlement that could fundamentally change the whole region. There needs to be a two-state solution.
But his calls for diplomacy are going unheard.
Beirut is already filling up with refugees. Public schools turned into shelters to accommodate the tens of thousands of Lebanese who have left the south and the west, areas that are being shelled by Israel right now.
Israel says it will fight until Hezbollah is disarmed. Hezbollah says it will fight until Israeli troops stop attacking Gaza. And neither side shows any sign of backing down.
A woman I spoke to tonight who evacuated to Beirut with 21 of her relatives told me she hopes the American government will act and not allow Lebanon to become the next Gaza.
Richard Engel with powerful reporting there. Richard, thank you. Up next, why a song you might have heard on social media probably is not what it seems. A dive into how AI might be behind the Bieber-like tune, talking about Sean Diddy Combs and the wide-reaching ramifications. That's all coming up after the break. Hey, welcome back. There's a song trending on social media that's probably the work of AI and has some big ramifications. That story is coming up in just a bit. But first, here's some of the headlines that we're watching tonight. FBI agents heading to arrest a former New York prosecutor were unsuccessful after the man died in an apparent suicide at his home. Stuart Rosenwasser was accused of accepting over $60,000 in bribes while serving as an attorney. Officials say that when the FBI arrived at the home, the retired judge pointed a gun at the agents, then at himself, and took his own life. At least one shot was fired by the FBI, and an investigation is underway. And Alabama is preparing to execute a second inmate using nitrogen gas this week. On Thursday, Alan Eugene Miller is set to be put to death for the murders of 3 of his co-workers in 1999. In January, Alabama became the first state to execute a prisoner by nitrogen gas. And a U.S. appeals court has ruled that a man who spent 26 years in solitary confinement can sue Pennsylvania prison officials for alleged cruel and unusual punishment. The court says prison officials may have violated the Americans with Disabilities Act because they knew the man had a history of mental illness. And just moments ago, the Columbus Blue Jackets held a moment of silence at their first preseason home game to honor Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. The brothers were killed on August 29th after being struck by a suspected drunk driver while riding bikes in New Jersey. And another Outer Banks beach house has collapsed into the ocean. The house was actually scheduled to be demolished this week, but the rough surf beat the contractors to it. This is a third home to collapse this week and the 10th since 2020. And by now, maybe you've heard a certain song of what might sound like Justin Bieber. And might sound are the key words because there is a good chance it is not real. Here's a little bit of it. Lost myself at a dating party. Didn't know that's how it goes. It went viral on social media after Sean Diddy Combs' arrest with lyrics alleging an experience at one of Diddy's parties. But here's the thing. In a day and age where AI is everywhere, there's no evidence that this is a real song. It's not on streaming platforms, not in Bieber's official catalog either. And instead, it has all the hallmarks of a deep fake. Let's bring in NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin. Maya, thanks so much for joining us. How long has this song been making the rounds, and how viral has it gotten?
So, Gadi, it originally came out in April of this year when we were seeing a lot of those accusations and videos around producer Sean Diddy Combs, but it's kind of recycled into the viral motion of things in the last few weeks, honestly, and that's because a lot of people are drawing comparisons to the lyrics and what Justin Bieber says he went through and what people around Justin Bieber says he went through. But as you mentioned, it sounds like Justin Bieber, but there's a lot of speculation on if it's AI or not. I reached out to Justin Bieber's team today, and they were not able to get back to us to confirm that or not. Gadi?
And Maya, is it possible to tell whether or not this is a fake song?
It's very, very tricky, but I reached out to a former Sony music producer, and he also created a company called Spy AI that works to try and determine AI's influence in products. His name's Steven Stahl. Take a listen to what he thinks about this track.
It can never be 100% guaranteed, unfortunately, because the technology is consistently improving and changing, so we always have to basically catch up to the next greatest piece of technology. There's still some AI artifacts in the voice that I can hear. You know, AI music hasn't fully gotten to the point where it's entirely indistinguishable from human vocals, so I can hear the AI artifacts. You know, it's heavily tuned, heavily auto-tuned as well.
So, Gadi, he's not completely convinced, but said there were definitely some clues as to why he thinks it's probably made with AI.
Wow, so he can kind of detect it just like some people are really good at spotting AI-altered images. It's really fascinating that his ears work that way. How hard is it to make something like this if this is a deep fake?
I think it's getting easier and easier. Actually, Gadi, I know you've had a lot of experience with some of these softwares. So have I in my reporting. Steven actually made an example of how easy it is using this song, but changed the lyrics to talk about this very story that we're reporting on. So take a listen and listen closely to how he was able to do this in 2 minutes.
At first, it talks about the NBC News report. Trying to determine if the song is real or AI.
The lyrics there are the NBC News report with Maya, where she's trying to determine if this song is real or AI, and he said he did it in 2 minutes.
I prefer that one much more than the other one. Maya, thanks so much for showing us that. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Angela Sinandela, because every day it seems like you're trying to explain the legality of all this and the illegality potentially. But Angela, if we could, this case is kind of disturbing when you really look at some of those lyrics. So let's just put aside this case. But for argument's sake, let's say that somebody makes an AI version of something that they know is false. They know it will harm the person's reputation. It gets released far and wide. Is that libel or is that defamation, or are those things out the window when it comes to AI and deep fakes?
So, Gadi, look, it's not obviously illegal, and that's because there's no clear law that this would directly violate. There are things like right to publicity laws, and those differ by state. Those are privacy laws, and those protect each of our right, and obviously Justin Bieber's as well, to not have our likeness, our image, our voice used for commercial purposes. But in a case like this, where it's not being used, obviously, for commercial purposes, it's unclear, because then on the other side, is it art? I mean, listening to that song that was just made there, is it music? Is it free expression? All of those are so deeply protected by our Supreme Court, by our Constitution, that it's not obvious here that it's defamation. We would need case law, or we would need legislators, our Congress or state legislators, making that clear. I mean, there are laws with regards to pornography and with regards to election interference and deep fakes, but not really in music like this, Gadi.
And the bar set even higher because he's a public figure. So let's see. What if we saw case law clearly established that that lumped all this in with defamation or libel? What would be the ramifications there on the civil side, not necessarily criminal side?
Yeah, so if it is case law, if it comes down in that AI-generated images and deepfake do clearly qualify as defamation and libel, then you could sue whoever it is that is generating or that is forwarding or that is sharing, distributing these images at all. You could also pretty easily get a form of injunction, meaning get the platform to take that down, to just stop the harming of your reputation. But again, that's only if it's not parody. We're in a world where meme culture dominates the internet. And even, for example, like Saturday Night Live, like parody is highly protected. So it would have to be clearly not parody in order for it to get into defamation. But yeah, there's all sorts of remedies. And in civil lawsuits, it's usually about money. There are also actually criminal laws that are starting, though, in states, again, in things like pornography and in those spaces, and that could come with jail time. But in a case like this, it would just be money.
And if one of those cases went through, like the burden of proof, would that be on the victim or on the edgelord?
Right. So in a case like this for defamation, the real defense there is true. So it is on the person who is suing to prove that this is not true and that it's not parody. And then the things like artistic expression, artistic license, that's something called an affirmative defense, meaning that then it would be up to the defendant there to raise it and to then prove, well, actually, no, this is art, this is expression, this is First Amendment, this is not. But in a case like this also where there's no commercial benefit, often you sue to get money and to take money from what someone else is making. So it's muddy here.
Yeah, a lot of hypotheticals there. Thanks for bearing with us, but those hypotheticals are very, very important. Angela Cinadella, thank you. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. We're going to go inside a school, not just using AI. They are putting the technology at the head of the class. That's right. In place of teachers, they are using AI. How the program works and what the students are learning, that's all coming up in the future of education.
Hey, Gadi. We're coming for your job.
Man, in tonight's Future of Everything, will AI become the teachers of our students, of our kids? That is the question at the heart of our story tonight. But first, let's see what happens real quick if we asked AI how it sees itself being used in the future of education. And out of the 4 major chatbots we asked, the predictions and specifically the words that came out were personalized, technology-driven, adaptive, accessible, and yes, full of AI. But notice there what is missing from that word cloud, the word teacher. And that leads us to an educational experiment happening in Texas at a private school where academic teaching is left exclusively to artificial intelligence. So what happened when they removed the human teacher from that equation? Well, we traveled to the Lone Star State to find out.
You can grab your computer and your headphones.
At Alpha's school in Austin, Texas, every day is an experiment. When you look around, like one of the things that's missing is the traditional like desks where everybody sits. Is this is their classroom for the day?
So think about more like a WeWork space.
A space where all the teaching of core curriculum is left to artificial intelligence.
How many shapies are in the pool in all?
6 times as many as 3 equals 18. Great work.
What are you working on here?
Core skills.
Core skills, huh?
AI is able to help you learn whatever you need to learn.
Who's teaching?
I think the app is teaching me, but I'm also teaching myself.
Here's the thing about an AI tutor. It doesn't care if a student is white, black, or brown. It doesn't care if a student is rich or poor. It doesn't care if a student is in the 10th percentile or the 85th percentile. It's infinitely patient.
For some people it might look like, wait, why is this kid just getting extra screen time? But we are learning, we're just learning in a different way.
The school day starts with 2 hours of AI learning, where different AI programs guide students through math, reading, language, and science.
This dashboard allows us to see what they completed and shows us, okay, are they hitting their goals, are they not?
All tracked by the school, the parents, and the students.
I'm in 8th grade science, and then 9th grade language, 10th grade reading, and then 7th grade math.
Where are you guys headed? What are you doing?
But here, co-founder Mackenzie Price says the grown-ups in the classroom are not called teachers because they're not teaching the curriculum.
Decision must be unanimous. Decide amongst yourselves.
They're called guides, more like motivational mentors / tech support.
It's okay that our guides aren't experts in physics or math.
It almost sounds like the guides here are told, you're not here to teach. You're here to lead the kids to AI.
Our guides are not allowed to teach. The adults that work in the classroom, their sole job is to provide motivational and emotional support.
Oh, you were so close.
They say condensing all core subjects into 2 AI-powered hours a day frees up the rest of the morning and the entire afternoon to do anything and everything else.
Please raise your hand if you feel like you're ready to spit fire.
Let there be drones up.
You got this.
We're making beef fajita tacos.
What is this?
This is called our check chart. We have academic topics, but we also have life skills.
I mean, yeah, you've got life skills. Independently put together a piece of IKEA furniture, then solve a Rubik's Cube, juggle for 10 seconds, and then run a mile without stopping?
Absolutely.
For the Airbnb in the workshop, we were...
Wait, hold on. Wait, let me rewind you. Airbnb, like
Yes.
an outside Airbnb
Right,
in
yeah.
the real world?
Yeah, we were running an Airbnb.
Price says the school is designed to give students twice as much time in these real-world workshops than their AI academics, which, according to Alpha, have not suffered at all. On average, here it takes just 80 days to advance grades, and their standardized test scores are in the 90th percentiles across the board. You have to score 90s to pass here.
Absolutely.
A's to pass, AI to learn, but no homework for kids and no lesson planning for educators.
I would argue, Gadi, there is no other school in the country getting the kind of academic results that our students are getting, and they're doing it in only 2 hours a day.
Can they do that without the help of AI when faced with a real-world problem or without the AI right there by their side?
The life skill that we are teaching is this ability to learn.
When a lot of people see the headlines about this school, they think, oh, well, they're taking the teachers out and they're putting AI in. How do you see it?
I see it as just like helpful support. So it's kind of like being a teacher, but with all of the dream support that you could want.
Most public school teachers across the country are not convinced. Only a tiny fraction see AI as a game changer in the classroom. And a quarter of those teachers surveyed say using AI does more harm than good. And then there's a question about access. Tuition at Alpha, which is a private school, starts at $10,000 and goes up to $40K for its highest earning families. Is this accessible for everyone?
So 2-hour learning can be implemented in any sort of model of schools. I believe that AI technology will come down in price enough that it will be accessible for students globally.
Price says they're working on releasing a public version of their AI-powered 2-hour learning system soon. But for now, their focus is getting their students ready for whatever comes next.
So I say this is the future of education here at Alpha.
Whether people like it or not.
Yeah.
And that was just kindergarten through 8th grade. Stay tuned later this week when we visit Alpha High School in Austin. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.